Good afternoon or good day, everybody, and welcome to this latest Ready2Loop webinar. And today we're going to officially launch the layer of the Ready2Loop platform for component manufacturers. We're very happy to have you all here today in the webinar, and I can inform that the webinar will be recorded as well for later use. With us today on the webinar, apart from myself, my name is McAloone. I'm professor here at the Technical University of Denmark. We have Daniela Pigosso, who is associate professor here at DTU, and Giovana Gomes is a postdoc researcher on Ready2Loop here at DTU. We're the core team that has been producing the contents for today's webinar from among a very, very large team of colleagues on the Ready2Loop project. And then in addition, we're very happy to welcome our two colleagues from respectively Rambøll and Vegan Moro, Nikki Bay, who is from a consultant from Rambøll, and Johannes Chin from Vegan Moro. And they're going to tell us a little bit later about how you can actually interact with us with the help of our consultants. So let's make a start. And we have just an hour together, and we have lots on our mind and lots to share with you as always. So we always take this point of departure for the Ready2Loop project, and this is basically showing the value chain that we're focusing on for Ready2Loop, starting at you could say if this was a clock, starting at 1 o'clock with materials providers through to component manufacturers, then production companies, original equipment manufacturers, to logistics companies, over to retailers, to maintenance and repair companies, and then to value recovery companies, companies which are recovering the value at a product, a component, or a material level. And today we're focusing, of course, on the value chain, because circular economy only is possible if the whole value chain is actually part of the process and involved in the transition to a circular economy. And what we're doing on Ready2Loop is to take each value chain layer, as we're calling them, one by one, and releasing them, launching them one by one, because each value chain layer has particular aspects to that value chain layer and that industry sector for companies to ask themselves how ready they are to make the transition to circular economy. So today you're witnessing the official launch of the value chain layer for component manufacturers. And what is a component manufacturer? So we're defining it in this way, and this is the academic part of the webinar. We're saying that a component manufacturer is a company which mostly focuses on creating components and subassemblies from materials and smaller components, primarily for sale to and for use by manufacturing companies in the manufacture of products. So that's basically manufacturers which are upstream in the value chain to, you could say, an original equipment manufacturer. And the characteristics of a component: it should be assembled into a product to perform its final function. It influences or are influenced on by product design, and the design and manufacturing may encompass B2B requirements that come from the customer. So that's basically the layer of the value chain that we're launching today. And we're going to spend the next minutes looking through actually the different dimensions of that value chain. And I'm going to hand over to Daniela to walk us through the dimensions of those, and then to Daniela and Giovana to walk us through each dimension one by one and give us a case example. So over to you, Daniela.
Thank you very much, Tim. And so we have 7 key dimensions for making the transition to a circular economy for component manufacturers. Those dimensions were identified through a very strong systematic review, complemented by engagements of companies that are within this layer, so that we could have a full understanding of what is actually needed to enhance your readiness for circularity. If we look here at the very top, we have the first dimension, which is related to the organizational issues connected to circular economy implementation. It is followed by the next dimension, which is focused on strategy and business model innovation, and aiming to understand how circularity is actually driving our way of achieving sustainability but also the way that we do business in our organization. The third dimension is component and service innovation. This dimension is connected to understanding both how we innovate our solutions to bring circularity into them. It is followed by sourcing and operations, looking into the value chain collaborations, both upstream for sourcing, during operations for manufacturing our components. Then we have technology and data as a really important dimension for circularity. Digitalization really brings loads of very important advancements in relation to that. And then we have take back and end of life strategies. It's super important to understand how to return components after the lifetime, and also how to implement circularity strategies. And last but not least, we have policy and market that has to do with the external environment, so that we can understand how we can both influence policy towards circularity, but also the market readiness. Now, let's start with the first dimension and see what are the key areas that we analyze within organization. And there are 5 main areas. So here we are looking into readiness in relation to the overall business case for the company. We are looking in terms of processes and tools that help this integration of circularity inside the organizations. We are looking to investment and also commitment, so that we have the right resources and responsibilities in place for integrating circular economy, and also that we bring the skills level up by training programs on circular economy. And if we look into one specific example of a company that are actually implementing this organizational readiness at a good level, we could talk about the Prismian Group. They are an Italian company that is present in more than 50 countries, and they are specialized in cable technologies, providing those components for both the energy and the telecommunication sectors. In relation to circularity readiness, they've been developing over the past year training programs that are aimed to enhance the employees' skills concerning circular economy. And they are also looking to how to bring circularity in their key activities in the organization across many different business processes. And just as an important fun fact, what we can actually see from a report made by McKinsey is that 87% of the companies are just now experiencing skill gaps in relation to circular economy implementation. And this is actually an area where we see a very strong focus worldwide to further advance the transition of those companies towards circularity. Let's move now towards Giovana, and she will tell us about the next dimension.
Thank you, Daniela. So the next dimension is strategy and business model innovation. Investigates the capabilities of companies to develop a long-term strategy involving new business models aligned with circular economy, which can enhance competitiveness and growth. And the questions, the aspects that guide this dimension focus on to what extent companies are establishing strategies to support the circular economy implementation, the offering of potential value propositions to different stakeholders, how far an organization is defining new cost structures and revenue streams, the mapping of circular economy opportunities through benchmarking and other process, how far the organization is establishing new partnerships to enable circular economy across the value chain, and to what extent the organization is sharing data and information also across the value chain. And as an example, we have Continental, a tire manufacturer. Continental is part of that dog catalog, which is a platform to share data packets in the automotive industry. By being part of this platform, Continental increases the brand visibility at the same time as shares tires data with other component manufacturers, with part dealers, workshops, and other stakeholders. And the shared knowledge can help the sector improving material usage, component and product efficiency, as well as co-development of solutions. And our research within Nordic countries showed that 24% of companies see highest potential for data sharing within product design. We can see there is an interdependency in terms of design between component and product manufacturers, making data sharing and transparency of a great importance for this layer. Over to you, Daniela, to the next dimension, which is component and service innovation.
Thank you. Let's move forward to the next dimension, and it has to do with understanding how we can actually innovate the way we are developing our products, in that case, components, and also services to enhance circularity. And here we have, again, 5 main areas that are key to be taken into account. The first one has to do with the readiness for extending the overall lifetime of components. The second one, in understanding what are the end-of-life strategies that would make the best sense. Would that be remanufacturing or reuse, or maybe recycling and cascading? Then here we can also talk about resource usage that has to do with understanding what types of inputs we are using to produce our components. The standard design allowing to be used across a wide range of different products. And finally, looking into research and development areas that will allow us to learn how we can better enhance the circularity of our components. The example that we brought here for you today is from Nilar. Nilar is a company that enables safe and sustainable energy systems by using a pioneer battery technology that enable the batteries to be recharged and revived several times. And this is extremely important to be able to enhance the overall lifetime of the batteries. And by doing that, minimizing the overall need for new batteries, and therefore slowing the circles from a circularity point of view. In addition to these recharge and revive capabilities, the batteries were also designed in a way that we can disassemble them easily in order to enable a reuse of subcomponents. And on top of that, the company is also offering a battery recycling service. And then a fun fact here, and actually the importance for bringing circularity in the early phases of product development, is that about 80% of the overall environmental performance of products are defined in the early design stages, up until the conceptual design, where most of the decisions are actually taken. Let's move now to the next dimension.
Thank you. So this dimension, sourcing and operations, measures how component manufacturers incorporate circular sourcing and operate in alignment with circular economy. Within this dimension, we will look at to what extent the organizations use circular resources such as recycled, renewable, or biodegradable materials. To what extent these organizations optimize the use of both energy and materials during the manufacturing process, and to what extent the organization is participating in industrial symbiosis activities, for instance, using waste streams from other industries. And an example of circular sourcing and operation is Componenta, which is Finland's leading contract manufacturer of metal components. Componenta foundry operations are strongly based on circular economy. The main raw material used for cast components is recycled metals. And in 2022, recycled steel represented 63% of all raw materials in Componenta's iron foundries. And just as a comparison, in 2020, only 12.8% of the materials used, the material resources used in the European Union came from recycled materials. With that, we go to the next dimension, technology and data.
And we are now in dimension number 5, It has to do how we can use the power of digitalization and technology to enable a better operation of the components during the use phase. So here we have three main areas. The first one has to do with component monitoring and how ready are we as a company to build upon technologies such as IoT or big data to monitor and understand the health of our components throughout life. It has also to do with improving our own manufacturing processes so that we can become more efficient and effective in the production of those components. And finally, knowing, for instance, when is the best time to repair the component on the basis of the data that we are analyzing so that we ensure a longer and a more comprehensive lifetime of those components at the same time as delivering the overall function that the product was designed for. And in here, the example that we bring to you is from Rolls-Royce, a company from the UK, which manufactures engines for the civil aviation. The company has been working with sustainability and servitization for quite many years, and they've recently partnered with Microsoft to come up with their intelligence engine platform that allows to data collection, storage, and analysis as well. And by doing that, basically what the platform is doing is to use machine learning to improve the overall manufacturing processes of Rolls-Royce, but also providing advice to the customer's operations so that they can minimize fuel consumption and maintenance by having a better operation of the engines as components of airplanes. And as an important information here, what we see is that in the EU, IoT or the Internet of Things could add about 5 trillion euro of economic value by 2030. And this is specifically relevant for the business-to-business sector that would benefit from 65% of this overall amount. Next dimension.
The next dimension is take-back and end-of-life strategies. Within this dimension, we look at the take-back strategies concerning components end-of-life, measuring organizations' capabilities to maximize the value of end-of-life components. In this dimension, the questions will address if the organizations are developing strategies to collect components after they use, to what extent the organizations are enabling or disassembling and remanufacturing components, and how far the organizations are in recovering materials from their components. Our business case is Danfoss, which recognizes its producer responsibility and provides safe means to dispose their components by creating Danfoss Take-Back and Recycling Program. Danfoss components are labeled according to how they can be disposed. Moreover, the company has established partnerships with networks of service providers across Europe. Therefore, Danfoss also guides their consumers on finding the best route or facility to recycle the components, as well as assist with the collection and transportation arrangements. However, globally, only 20% of the generated electronic waste is collected and recycled, pressing for energetic solutions in terms of end-of-life strategies. Next dimension is policy and market. Daniela.
Yeah, thank you, Giovana. So last but not least, we have policy and market. So far, we've been looking mostly into internal dimensions in an organization, but we know that to make the transition to a circular economy is also extremely important to look into the policy framework and also the market requirements for more circular solutions. In this dimension, we are looking into a number of different areas that will help us to understand what is the market readiness, for instance, for reused components or remanufactured components. We are also looking into collaborations upstream in the value chain to understand what is the potential for circularity. We are looking into how we can co-develop new solutions that are more circular by bringing together different stakeholders. We are investigating sectorial frameworks and looking into how circularity is being taken into account into those, And finally, I also look into national and international policies. And as an example, for this dimension, we have Bridgestone, which is extremely proactive in engaging into the legal frameworks. One example, for instance, is that they are working together with the US Tire Manufacturers Association to enable that 100% of their scrap tires would enter into circular economy and use markets. To do that, they are actually having a very strong work together with regulators, legislators, and also different partners in the value chain to advocate for this market shared responsibility system that will enable a better management of scrap tire, and at the same time trying to develop a new market for this tire that would otherwise be disposed. And by doing that, of course, they enhance the circularity of their business by enabling a higher value creation from this scrap material. And we see that in Europe just now, there are several industrial alliances, but talking about all different sorts of areas, but to date, the only one that is strictly focused on circular economy is related to plastics, and it's the Circular Plastics Alliance. So with that, we walked through all of these 7 key dimensions for evaluating circular economy readiness in the component manufacturers. And Tim's going to talk a little bit more about what we can do with it and how this can actually help companies within this specific layer to become more circular. Over to you, Tim. Tim, I think you are muted.
Rookie mistake. Thank you, Daniela. Thanks both Daniela and Giovana. And you can now see that the different dimensions have been displayed and described from the new layer for component manufacturers. And as Daniela was presenting, I just remember we need to release it. So I've now released it and opened the layer as well. So it should be available for you after the webinar. But the question is, what do we do now, and how do you use the ready2loop platform to start to transition yourselves through towards a different circular economy readiness level? And you can see the picture here. There's 3 different main ways that you can do. First of all, and the picture here looks slightly different because it's a different layer. It has slightly fewer dimensions, but basically the idea is that you can now go in and make your readiness profile. If you're from a company which is a component manufacturing company, you'll be brought into that layer of the platform. You can carry out your readiness assessment and invite your colleagues to do that. You can, once you've completed your readiness assessment, you can go and do a benchmarking. You can benchmark yourselves actually against all of the companies on the platform within the particular layer, so other component manufacturers, and we've just released it today, so we only have a few companies in there just now, but we'll be boosting that over the next weeks. But you can benchmark and see anonymously, of course, how well are we doing compared to other companies in the same value chain layer. And then finally, you can look at your prioritization of where you'd like to go and where you'd like to increase your readiness, and what transition path, as we call it, you should take from your current state to a future state. All of this you can do on your own, and we have a number, about 150 tools on the platform now, which actually self-organize, or they're categorized so that whatever layer you are, whatever readiness assessment and whatever transition path you will choose, they will filter out for you automatically to help you along the way. You can get access to all of that if you're a relevant company here straight away. But another way to do it is to start a so-called accelerator project. And for that, I'm going to, in a second, introduce Ja and Nikki. And to do this, we have on the ready2loop project, we have 2 consultancies which are affiliated to the project and certified by us to help you through the whole process of acceleration, from seeing your readiness to saying, how do we improve and boost our readiness? So I'd like to give the word to Ja and Nikki for a few minutes to run us through the process of acceleration. Over to you, Ja.
Many thanks, Tim, and thanks for the invitation for this. And as Tim mentioned, both me and Nikki were both certified consultants to utilize the platform and go through the different steps. Just to mention that even though I go through the next couple of steps, Nikki also know how to do it, and vice versa. So what we'll do, actually, as Tim mentioned, you could do this alone, but what we will do is actually to bring in some of our knowledge and the knowledge we have from the certification process, and also help facilitate this process of transitioning into a more circular economy, especially within this field of component manufacturing. The first step we'll go through is to engage the key stakeholders. So that's usually the first step we'll go through with all of the companies. We'll try to scope and find out what kind of stakeholders would be good to bring in to the process. What we recommend usually is to bring as a wide variety as possible within the company, but it could also be that you choose to narrow it down to a specific business unit or department, and we'll also help you to navigate through which colleagues and stakeholders to bring in that process. So that's the first part of it, selecting and scoping down onto what kind of stakeholders to bring in. The second part will be to actually do the circular readiness assessment. So go through all the 7 dimensions. How it usually is done is we come out to you and a full day workshop. So we'll go through each of the dimensions together with you, together with the selected stakeholders, and run through what's the theory behind it, and also provide some cases and engage into the discussions with you to help you find the best what's called the balance of what to prioritize in terms of strengths or opportunities. And the results based on these different dimensions will come on the third step, reflect on the strengths and gaps. So based on the circular readiness assessment, there'll be different results on the 7 dimensions, and based on those, you can have an overview of what specific strengths are and opportunities, and will help you prioritize which ones to focus on in a very systematic way together with you. So you're actually the ones deciding which one would be most relevant for you. So that's the first 3 steps, and I would like to give the word to Nikki to continue to explain the process of this accelerators.
Yeah, thank you, Ja, and also thanks to Tim and the team for having us today. Yeah, basically, as Ja said, during this process, we would guide you and assist you and be along in identifying, for instance, those strengths and gaps, and walk through the process. And at some certain point, there will be a number of improvement opportunities, ways that you can go. For instance, externally, as Daniela explained, looking into external opportunities with new markets. It could also be internally in terms of data or new internal decisions. So there will be quite a range of different opportunities, and basically we would pinpoint together with you what are those opportunities actually, and then look deeper into them, which are actually realistic to be done, and what consequences would they have. And then basically as a 5th step, when all those opportunities are identified and named, you can say, looking into, okay, what does that mean in the organization to really make what should happen first, what should happen afterwards. So making an action plan, basically a roadmap, and yeah, starting the journey. And then also very important, as we always underline, stay on the journey. So not just start, but really making sure that there's internal buy-in and ownership in the company. And that's what we then call is basically starting the transition, and doing this in a rolling process where basically you would, guided by us, start this process and then be self-running in this transition process towards yeah, being more and more ready to loop in this field. Yeah, thank you.
Many thanks, Ja and Nikki. So that was how you can get support for the process of acceleration. You can either do it yourself or with one of our 2 certified consultancies. So what happens now? So by this webinar, we've actually launched the 4th dimension. So the component manufacturer dimension. We're going to boost the launch of this, actually be carrying out some roadshows, or a roadshow with 3 workshops in. So on the 27th of June, we're coming to Silkeborg. On the 28th of June to Aalborg, and on the 29th of June, we'll have a workshop here at DTU. And we'll be running those for whoever would like to join those. And you can follow those both on the ready2LOOP website, which you can see in the bottom left of the slides, but also on our LinkedIn feed if you follow us on LinkedIn. So that's the next part of how we're going to boost the launch of this layer. Otherwise, going forward, we're continuing to complete the circle, you could say, quite literally, and we'll have other layer releases on the way, and I'll show those in a second or 2. But basically, around about every 6 months, we release a new layer. We have a little bit of news because we've made a new layer to put in. A few more words on that in a couple of seconds, but that will actually come in just in a couple of months, just after summer. So an extra bonus layer that we've put in there as well. And then once we've completed the whole circle here of all of these currently 7 and soon to be 8 layers of the value chain, we then start to look across the value chain to see how can we create cooperation across the value chain, which is basically our end game, because as we've mentioned a couple of times now, circular economy only can be possible if every single layer of the value chain is connected, every part of the chain, because otherwise the chain is broken, right? So the idea there is to see how can we start to actively use the platform to help companies to join up different parts of the value chain for circular economy. Now, a few words on the release of the new layers on the platform. And today's layer launch is the component manufacturers one. If you had a really sharp eye, you may have seen that the packaging manufacturers layer didn't exist before just now. And we've decided, actually, when we were looking at component manufacturers and retailers and logistics providers, we realized that packaging is in itself a really important part of any value chain. And so we decided to put this extra layer in. We've also seen an enormous interest from the industry to see how can we focus on making a more circular economy practice for packaging companies and the whole packaging practice. We saw under COVID, but also during the last decade or so, with more and more online purchasing and online trade, that the amount of packaging has just skyrocketed. So how can we do that better from a circularity perspective? So we're going to be putting that in actually and releasing already in September. Then at the end of the year in December, we're releasing a new layer on for retailers. We're quite excited about that one as well, because it's quite different to some of the other value chain layers we've had so far. And then for 2024, around this time, just a bit earlier next year, we'll be releasing the layer for logistics providers. And then last but not least, in October next year, releasing the layer for repair and maintenance services. And after that, we start to join up all the different layers of the value chain there. Just before we go on to the questions, and we have a few questions, and if you have any questions yourselves, by the way, just shoot them into the Q&A and we'll field those. Daniela's going to field those. I have a first question for you, Daniela, and then if you field the questions for us after that, that'd be really nice. But first of all, how the project is built up. So the ready2LOOP project is supported by the Industry Foundation. DTU is the knowledge partner on the project, and as you've seen just now, we have Vigan Moore and Ambul as our current certified consultancies on the project, and each of those will provide 42 accelerator projects throughout the 4.5 years of the project. And then we have great support from a steering committee, which consists of colleagues from MADE, the Manufacturing Academy of Denmark, from the Danish Business Authority, and from the Confederation of Danish Industry. So it's just a bit about the governance of the ready2LOOP project. I'm going to hand over to you now, Daniela. And while I do that, I'm just going to put a show-off slide on the screen showing some of the companies that have actually used the platform and are currently using the platform to see how ready they are to transition to the circular economy. But Daniela, the first question, and then I'm going to give the word to you to take the others. The first question here is from Francisco, and it's saying, thanks for the presentation. Do you see a rebound effect? And now you know why I'm asking you, because you're working with rebound effects in very much in your profession. Do you see a rebound effect from implementing a circular economy into products which are not sustainable, e.g. cars, aviation, etc., which means increasing the efficiency of materials used into these products, leading to an increase in their consumption as more of these non-sustainable products are manufactured? So I think it's a perfect question for you.
It is indeed. Thanks a lot for the question, Francisco. It is a really important point. So the way we see circularity is as a means towards sustainability. And it's really important that we integrate circular solutions in specific areas that will help us to actually achieve those. That's also why we always look into sustainability evaluation. And you are very right in asking about rebound effects, because we know that they might occur, as in the example that you just presented. And it's therefore extremely important to account for them when you evaluate the overall sustainability performance of those products, services, or solutions. So keeping always in mind this link between circularity and sustainability is key. And what ready2LOOP actually help us to do is to understand how ready a given company is to implement circularity across their business. And by doing that, enhancing the chances of actually achieving a higher sustainability performance as well, with hopefully the least amount of rebound effects as possible. I hope it answers your question. Otherwise, feel free to ask a follow-up. But in the meantime, I want to also bring up the other questions that we got from you in relation to the presentation today. And the first one is to Giovana, and it has to do with how was the process for defining the dimensions that we have for component manufacturers, but also the aspects, and how much can we trust that those are actually the areas that help us to measure readiness in this area?
Thank you, Daniela. So you have mentioned before that the process of developing the ready2LOOP platform and the self-assessment questionnaire is a scientific-based process. And by that, we start by analyzing the circular economy literature, specifically for this case on component manufacturers and how ready component manufacturers can be to implement the circular economy. So we first start by looking at this literature, by analyzing what are the key aspects. So what companies that have been successful implementing circular economy has implemented, which activities, tools, and other key aspects. And then we cluster these activities, these aspects into dimensions. It's what is really special about this transition for this specific layer. And something that is important here, we are talking about component manufacturers, but what is important to mention is that we have the same process for all of the layers that are released through ready2LOOP platform. So we have a consistent scientific-based process. Other than just implementing, having this assessment through the literature review, we also have validation process. And this validation process occur both internally with academic experts that validate the dimensions, the questions that we provide, but also we have external validation with companies within each layer. So in this case, with component manufacturers. And these companies can help us assess if our questionnaire is really looking into the specific contents for each layer. And this is our process of developing each self-assessment for each release.
Thanks for that. It sounds extremely impressive. And you actually touched upon the different layers that we have in the platform as well. And this connects to the next question that I'd like maybe to ask you, Tim, to answer. And this is, how does this specific layer with component manufacturers complement the other layers that we have in the platform just now?
Yeah, thanks for that question. Yeah, so it complements it in. I'm going to use my power as the one who's sharing the slides to show this picture. It complements very nicely because, I mean, everything is in a value chain here, right? So everything that comes before it, the materials are very, very often going into components, which go into subcomponents, which finally go to an original equipment manufacturer. So I think the upstream, downstream aspects of this are really, really important to consider. And that's why we've put a lot of focus on this layer into understanding specifically for component manufacturers, which, by the way, there's the most of in the whole world, to make sure that their readiness is in order and to really spend special attention on what are the particularities for component manufacturers to consider when understanding their readiness. Quite often, component manufacturers are part of product development processes or even have their own product development processes, but very, very often they're not. They're basically being specified to by their customers, large customers in a business-to-business circumstance. And that somehow locks them into certain considerations and certain conditions. But increasingly as well, as we'll see from now onwards, increasing amounts of demands and requests, demands from, for example, the EU taxonomy and from all different types of circular economy packages and green deals and you name it. There's more and more focus coming onto the upstream activities, not least also for the science-based targets for the scope 3 upstream considerations. Lots of considerations to be made about how is my supplier from an OEM perspective doing in terms of their CO2 footprint and the circularity and so forth. So for here, the connection between component manufacturer and their customers, larger companies or maybe subcomponent manufacturers, is really important. But then, of course, this looks like a perfect cycle with just one of each stakeholder in a line. But of course, what's joining these things up is the logistics activities. The logistics value chain layer is actually the glue between all of these different layers. That's also super important to understand. And then what does it mean for the maintainability of our component? What does it mean for the recovery of our component? So at some stage or other, all of the value chain layers have a connection to each other, but the immediate adjacency from the materials providers to the component manufacturers and then the component manufacturers to the original equipment manufacturers is really, really important to focus on.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for that, Tim. And the next question that we have, I'd like to ask Ja to answer. And the question is that there are many examples as we speak on large companies, and we tend to always get back to those when we want to talk about circularity. And the question is whether this approach that we are following in ready2loop can also be used by smaller companies, medium companies, and even maybe startups. Do you have any thoughts on that, John?
Yeah, it is very relevant, and some of the accelerators we have been running actually with small and medium companies, so they are definitely useful. The tools can be used similarly, and compared to larger companies, there's actually an advantage to the smaller companies because there are less departments or less by kind of layers, so it's kind of easier to transition towards specific what's called prioritizations and improvement areas and so forth. So it's sometimes easier to transition within specific areas, and yeah, so they are useful for especially also the small and medium companies. And what we've seen, they are also more easy to apply for funds, so you can actually apply for some public funds to actually get some of the cost coverage for some of these accelerator programs. And we would like to talk more about that, of course, but you are welcome to contact us afterwards to ask more about like what kind of process it requires to apply for these funds. And it's especially also we get a lot of requests and questions from small and medium companies actually, because of the larger companies. They are hit by the new CSRD requirements or doing climate accountings, and they require like more reductions in the scope 3, and that goes back into the maybe smaller, medium-sized component manufacturers. So they also have to take action within circular economy as well. So yeah, but in short term, it's very applicable for small, medium-sized, and also better advantages sometimes with less friction organizationally, and also possibility to apply for funds and money to support these processes.
Beautiful. Thank you very much for that, Jai. And maybe if I just may complement with some data from the manufacturing companies, we actually see that SMEs tend to be more ready than larger companies for transitioning to circularity, which just proves the fact that you've just mentioned that they are more flexible and easier to operate. Beautiful. I think we have time to a final question, and I want to ask that to you, Nikki. And we have questions in relation to how to engage if a company wants to make part of this platform, but also how long would a typical engagement take, and how much resources would the company need to invest on it?
Yeah, thanks, Daniela. Jar was mentioning it a little bit already beforehand. Basically, you can reach out to us directly through the ready2LOOP homepage, or in relation to this presentation here, our Tim had just a slide up with our contact. So direct contacting to both Jar or me. We have developed a default process of about 2 weeks work week duration, which is basically the same with either Vegan Mobile or Rumble. So this is in total alignment. So you would get the same process with each of us certified consultants. And it would take you actually in the companies, it would take you finding those key stakeholders, let's say 3, 4 individuals, which are in different positions in the company, making decisions about purchase or manufacturing, if you have that, or market conditions and so on, and doing 2 touchpoint workshops with us, which we would prepare and also do some afterwork with you. I would also like to stress that the general idea is that you would have done your self-assessment beforehand, but we have also gotten requests on doing that maybe together with you. So that could also be an opportunity. But basically, reach out to us, and then we have those standard processes of about 2 weeks duration, stretching over a couple of months, typically, depending on when people are available and so on. And I would also like to add one point also mentioned before in terms of this synergies, because this what's mentioned several times earlier, there are some synergies in those opportunities that we would look into, where there's, for instance, in terms of reporting, where there's some reporting necessity coming to maybe your own customers, and where you could then help basically your customers in the reporting direction, be it on climate or be it on general corporate sustainability reporting, as Jar also mentioned earlier. So it's not only everything on top and in parallel, but it can actually show very nice synergies to some activities that you're interested beforehand. So and that's the overall idea with those accelerator programs, that we would guide you and sort of say develop a tailor-made solution for you, so that you again can run these processes by yourself at some point. Absolutely.
Thank you very much for that, Nikki. It's quite impressive to see how fast you can actually go from understanding the current situation of the company to coming up with a prioritized roadmap that will help them to focus on what matters. And I think this is probably one of the things that most companies today are really looking after. I'm afraid we don't have time for more questions, but let me get back to you, Tim, and then you can close us for today.
Thanks, Daniela. Yes, we'd like to get you to your next meeting on the hour. So we're going to close it down here just a few minutes before, so you can transition. It's not like the olden days where you can just go from one Teams meeting to the next. So I know that people need to move. So just by way of closing, we'd like to thank you for your attention today for joining us at the seminar, this webinar, and we hope that you enjoy using the platform. If you're a component manufacturer, feel welcome to try it out. If you're not a component manufacturer, you may get access to one of the other layers on the platform. You'll find that out when you register. The current layers that are available are these ones here, and this is the official launch now. This is the first time we go in to the component manufacturer layer. There we go. There we're in as the first user of the layer. But if you're not a component manufacturer, you'll get access to one of the other layers. If you're a consultant, a researcher, or an NGO and so forth, we'll give you access to the product manufacturer layer to try it out. But we're very, very careful to look after the data that we're using as a basis for helping you to assess your readiness and where to move from here. So for that reason, you'll get access to the component manufacturer layer if you are a component manufacturer, and there's many of you out there. So we hope you enjoy either this layer or one of the others. Do keep following us both on our website, where we'll post regular updates of other webinars and other releases, but also on the LinkedIn page. If you go into ready2LOOP on LinkedIn and follow us, you'll also get lots of updates, or not lots, the relevant amount of updates as they come, so you can follow what's happening with the project there. Many thanks once again for your attention, and we hope that you have success in your transition to circular economy. Bye-bye.